why is it that you can actually go into like an airplane, right? You can have like those little free falling airplanes where you're in the airplane, all of a sudden you're experiencing basically zero gravity because you're in free fall, right? And you kind of simulate it like, oh,
No.
it's interesting and cool. So if you took this column and took it to the zero gravity weight, right? And then you introduce an object in between that density there, is the object going to be sorted by the relative density? No, it's not. And why? Because you're in
Uh,
zero gravity.
There's definitely no such thing as zero gravity. Even the ISS is apparently 95% that's gravity, and they say it's 250 miles high, so that's clearly false. Everything is resistance, and if you think of acoustics, for example, is a good way of thinking of it. If sound, we say that the higher sound is always the lighter tone, the deeper sound is the more bass things. Everything in physics requires a base. The base is the form of resistance from everything starts. So the density tower itself has a base, and then it has solid walls. And everything finds its place when it's at rest. Once it's at rest, that's where we get the word resistance from. So everything that once it's at rest has resistance to one thing to another. When everything is in free fall, which is what you falsely call is zero G, it's actually everything is just in free fall in an enclosed capsule, creating the simulation of zero gravity because everything's falling at the same time at once. Well, everything is just free to drop at the same rate. It's the rate of drop is not determined by the density of the object. Otherwise, heavier objects would always fall faster than the others, but everything is falling at exactly the same time. Once it comes to rest, then the things will form themselves according to their relative density and give us the density tower that we see. You need resistance and at rest from the base of the tower. The best way to measure the circumference of the Earth would be to use gravity to suspend long plumb bobs down towards the center, because everything is attracted towards the center according to the laws of your gravity. And it's more practical than erecting mile-high poles, measuring the distance at the top and measuring the distance at the bottom. What they did is they suspended long plumb bobs down deep mine shafts in order to measure the distance at the top compared to the distance at the bottom, which would be less, and therefore they could use a formula to determine a more accurate circumference for the circumference of the Earth. But what they found in every example is that the plumb bobs actually got further apart towards the bottom. And in fact, when they finally selected two mine shafts a mile apart at the surface, at a mile depth, joined by a horizontal shaft at the bottom, they were 1 mile, 8 inches apart at the bottom, which is the exact opposite of expectations of globe Earth measurements. So you are saying that they are using gravity to measure the levelness of this GOLI system that you're talking about, and yet real science found that using gravity to measure level goes the opposite direction of expectations. How do you explain that?
Could you repeat the name of this? Because I haven't heard of this mineshaft experiment with plumb bobs, and I would like to look more into it, but obviously without being familiar with the actual material, I won't be able to weigh in on it. So I'd like to look it up for a later point. So remind me the name of this so I can just jot it down.
Okay, you'll probably have to go to a library to find most of the information.
Just tell me what the name of it is called.
Because looking online will give you very little. It's called TAMARACK, TAMARACK, Mine Mysteries. That's the general thing. If you search that, you'll find a little bit of information about the guy who reported on it in one of the scientific journals. The TAMARACK Mine Mysteries is quite well known. I first read about it in a book which is actually called Secret of the Ages, which is talking about a hollow Earth. And this guy was proposing that we live on the outside surface of a hollow Earth. But really, after you follow that experiment, you have to presume if we were living on the inside, as the concave Earthers like to say, that makes far more sense, where gravity could be explained by the rotation of it, which is what NASA often proposes for a spaceship design to artificially simulate gravity in space, would be to have it spinning. So that if we're on the inside surface, rotating fast enough, that could actually explain how gravity even works. It's like a centripetal force. Water would still seek and find its level. The atmosphere would still move with us. Planes flying high would fly shorter distances. So if we lived on the inside of the Earth, it makes far more sense than living on the outside, hurtling through a vacuum of space, where gravity is a necessary requirement to make it possible that people could live on the. To make a career, you have to have somebody who's willing to pay you to do something. And if you don't give them the results they want, well, you're not going to get paid, you're going to get dumped, and you're going to get thought of as a crackpot theorist. And that's why flat earthers do not have a career in science, because we question the science. We question all of the nonsense that you guys bring up, whereas you guys have to keep on whacking each other on the back and getting peer support from one another. You can't do anything new in science without being shunned. And if somebody did prove the TAMARACK Mine Mysteries, they would get kicked out of science. They would be considered.
So here's the thing, though.
The Earth is not a spinning ball in space. Don't just take things at face value, dive deep, do your own research, and come to the light. This is for entertainment purposes only.